My fiancé said at the venue, "I want a destination wedding in Bora Bora. Tell your grandparents they can't come. They're too old to travel." My grandparents raised me. I said, "Let me think about it." Then I canceled the venue, threw a small ceremony with my grandparents officiating, and married someone else 6 months later. When she got the wedding announcement, original post, I, 31 male, was raised by my grandparents since I was 4. My mom passed from complications after a car accident, and my dad, well, he decided fatherhood wasn't really his vibe and dipped to start a new chapter with some woman he met at a bar. My grandparents didn't hesitate. They were in their late 50s, had just started thinking about retirement, and instead they got a traumatized 4-year-old who wet the bed and screamed in his sleep for 2 years straight. My grandfather taught me how to ride a bike, how to change a tire, how to shake a man's hand. My grandmother taught me how to cook, how to budget, how to sit with someone who's hurting without trying to fix it. They're the reason I'm a functioning adult. Full stop. So when I got engaged to my fiancée after 3 years of dating, the one thing I said from day one was, my grandparents are not optional. They walk me down the aisle. They sit front row. They're the reason any of this is happening. She said she understood. She said she loved that about me. She said, and I quote, "Your devotion to them is one of the reasons I fell in love with you." Cool. Remember that line. It ages like milk. We've been engaged for about 5 months. Wedding planning was a lot. I'm not going to pretend I was super involved in the aesthetic stuff. She wanted a certain vibe. I said go for it. But I was handling the budget because I'm an accountant and also because her spending impulses are, let's say, ambitious. We'd agreed on a $35,000 budget. Her parents were contributing $10,000. My grandparents insisted on giving us $8,000, which I tried to refuse, but my grandmother literally said, "You will take this money or I will be offended until I die." And the rest was from our savings. We'd already put a deposit on a venue. Nice place. Indoor-outdoor. Capacity for 150, 20 minutes from my grandparents' house. Perfect. Then one Saturday, we're at the venue doing a walkthrough with the coordinator, and my fiancée gets this look on her face. You know the look. The one where someone's about to say something they've been rehearsing in the shower for a week. She goes, "Babe, I've been thinking. What if we did a destination wedding instead? Like Bora Bora?" I laughed. Literally laughed. Because Bora Bora? On our budget? Ma'am. She didn't laugh. She pulled out her phone and showed me a Pinterest board with like 400 pins. Overwater bungalows, sunset ceremonies, the whole fantasy. She'd been planning this parallel wedding in her head for weeks apparently. I said, "That's beautiful, but that's like $80,000 minimum. We don't have that." She said her parents would probably increase their contribution and that we could figure it out. Then she said the thing. And honestly, babe, it would solve the guest list problem. We could keep it small, like really small. And your grandparents, I mean, they're in their 80s. The flight alone is like 15 hours with a layover. It's not realistic for them. We'd be doing them a favor by not putting them through that. You could just FaceTime them during the ceremony. FaceTime them. FaceTime them. I didn't say anything for a solid 10 seconds. The venue coordinator suddenly became very interested in her clipboard. I said, "Let me think about it." That's what I say when I'm so angry I can't trust my own mouth. My grandmother taught me that. When you're furious, buy yourself time. Anger makes you honest, but not always accurate. We drove home in silence. She kept glancing at me, and at one point she said, "You're not seriously mad about this, right? I'm trying to plan our dream wedding." I said, "Let me think about it." That night, I didn't sleep. I laid there running through every conversation we'd had about my grandparents, every time she'd smiled at them at Sunday dinner, every time she called my grandmother Gram, like she was part of the family. And I started seeing things differently. The way she'd sigh when I said we were going to their house again. The way she'd check her phone through my grandfather's stories. The way she'd suggested we scale back holiday visits because we need our own traditions. I wasn't just mad about Bora Bora. I was mad because I've been ignoring a pattern. The next morning, I called the venue and asked about the cancellation policy. The coordinator told me we'd lose the $2,500 deposit, but could cancel without further penalty if we did it within the next 10 days. I canceled it that afternoon. I didn't tell my fiancé for 3 days. During those 3 days, She sent me Bora Bora resort links every single day. She created a shared Google Doc titled Our Dream Wedding with a budget breakdown that assumed her parents would give $25,000. They had offered $10,000, and she hadn't even asked them about more, and that my grandparents' $8,000 would go toward flights for us and her parents. Her parents. Using my grandparents' gift to fly her parents to Bora Bora while my grandparents watched on FaceTime. On day 3, I sat her down and said, I canceled the venue. Her face lit up. She literally gasped and said, "Oh my God, are we doing Bora Bora?" No, I canceled the venue because I'm canceling the wedding. I can't marry someone who would ask me to exclude the 2 people who raised me so she can take photos in an overwater bungalow. The conversation that followed was about 2 hours of her cycling through every stage of manipulation. Tears first, then bargaining. What if they come, but just to the reception part? Then anger. You're choosing 2 old people over our future. Then guilt. I've already told my friends. Do you know how embarrassing this is? The 2 old people line was the one that sealed it. Not because it was the worst thing she said, but because she said it so naturally, like she'd thought it before. Many times. I moved out of our apartment that weekend. Stayed with my buddy from work for a few weeks until I found my own place. She kept my grandparents' $8,000 check, by the way. I'd already given it to her to hold for the wedding fund. I asked for it back. She said she'd already deposited it, and that it was for the wedding. And since I was the one breaking things off, she considered it hers. $8,000. My grandparents' money. Gone. That's where part 1 ends. I know this is already long, but trust me, it gets way more insane. Update 1, 3 weeks later. Alright, y'all. I did not expect the first post to blow up like that, so thank you for the support. Some of you were asking for an update, and honestly things have escalated in ways I couldn't have predicted, so here we go. First, the money. A lot of you told me to take her to small claims court for the $8,000. I talked to a lawyer buddy, and he said I could try, but it would be messy. The check was made out to both of us. She deposited it into her personal account, and she'd argue it was a gift for the wedding. He said I'd probably win, but it would cost me time and money and stress. My grandfather, when I told him what happened, just shook his head and said, "That money bought you the truth about her. That's worth more than $8,000. I swear that man drops wisdom like he's being paperword. So I let it go. Not because she deserved to keep it, but because I didn't want to spend the next 6 months in court staring at her face. Now, here's where it gets spicy. About a week after I moved out, I started getting texts from her mother. Not angry texts at first, more like passive-aggressive wellness checks. Just checking on you, sweetie. We're all so worried. She's barely eating. Then, I hope you know what you've done to our family. Then, my personal favorite, her father and I spent $10,000 on this wedding, and you just threw it away like it was nothing. Ma'am, you spent $10,000 on a wedding your daughter torpedoed by trying to exclude my elderly grandparents. Direct your complaints accordingly. But it didn't stop there. Her mother started calling my grandmother, telling her that I was making a huge mistake, that her daughter was the best thing that ever happened to me, and that my grandparents were being selfish by not encouraging me to work things out. My grandmother, God bless her, handled it with more grace than I would have. She said, "Ma'am, my grandson makes his own decisions, and I trust every single one of them. Please don't call this number again." And then she blocked her. But here's the part that really got me. 2 weeks after the breakup, I found out through a mutual friend that my ex had been telling everyone a completely different story. According to her version, I had cold feet and couldn't handle the pressure of commitment. She told people I had intimacy issues and that she'd been trying to help me work through them. She never mentioned Bora Bora. She never mentioned my grandparents. She painted herself as this patient, loving woman who got blindsided by a man who couldn't grow up. When I heard that, I'll be honest, it stung. Because I have friends in that circle, people I've known for years, and some of them were buying it. I thought about posting the Google document, the Our Dream Wedding budget where she allocated my grandparents' money for her parents' flights. I thought about screenshotting every Bora Bora text, but my grandfather said something that stuck. People who know you don't need an explanation. People who don't know you won't believe one. So I said nothing publicly, but I did have quiet conversations with the friends who mattered. I showed them the texts. Every single one of them went silent, then said some version of, "Dude, I'm sorry, I had no idea." The mutual friend who told me about the fake story, she was furious. She'd been one of my ex's bridesmaids. Key word had been. She quietly stepped back from the friendship. Didn't make a scene. Just stopped being available. Now here's the part none of you are going to believe, but I swear on everything it's true. About 5 weeks after the breakup, I ran into someone at a friend's barbecue. A woman I'd actually gone to high school with, but hadn't seen in years. We'd been friendly back then, nothing more, just ran in the same circles. She'd moved away for college and had recently come back after ending a long-term relationship of her own. We talked for like 3 hours at that barbecue. Not flirting, just talking. About our grandparents. Hers had been a huge part of her life, too. Her grandmother had passed the year before, and she was still processing it. About failed relationships. About what we actually wanted versus what we thought we were supposed to want. I wasn't looking for anything. I was honestly still raw from the breakup. But something about talking to someone who just got it, who understood what it meant to be raised by grandparents, who didn't think it was weird that I went to Sunday dinner every week. It just clicked. We exchanged numbers, started texting, then calling, then spending entire weekends together. It moved fast, I know. But here's the thing about getting out of the wrong relationship. You suddenly have perfect clarity about what the right one feels like. 3 months after that barbecue, I knew. And so did she. And before anyone comes at me, yes, I was sure. When you spend 3 years with someone who slowly reveals they don't respect the people who made you who you are, and then you meet someone who tears up when your grandfather tells a story of teaching you to ride a bike, you just know. Meanwhile, my ex was not handling things well. She burned through most of her friend group with the fake story because eventually the truth got around. The bridesmaid who stepped back? She told 2 other people. Those people told others. Nobody confronted my ex directly, but the invitations stopped coming. The group chat went quiet. She went from being the poor, heartbroken bride to being the girl who tried to ban her fiancé's grandparents from the wedding. Her mother doubled down. She actually showed up at my grandparents' house one afternoon. Just showed up. My grandfather answered the door, and she launched into this speech about how I was ruining her daughter's life, and that my grandparents had poisoned me against a good woman. My grandfather, and this is the part that makes me laugh every time, just said, "Ma'am, you're on my porch uninvited. That's more than your daughter would have allowed my wife and me at the wedding. Have a nice day." And close the door. Have a nice day. This man is undefeated. She banged on the door for another 5 minutes. My grandmother called the non-emergency police line. An officer came out, explained trespassing to her like she was 5, and she left. No charges, just a warning. But the officer's report exists, and that matters later. Here's where the money thing comes back. Remember how she kept the $8,000? Well, around this time, I found out from the mutual friend network that she'd used that money for a girl's trip. A girl's trip. My grandparents' $8,000, the money they pulled from their retirement savings to help their grandson start a marriage, funded bottle service, and beach cabanas for my ex and 3 friends. When that detail reached my grandmother, it was the only time I've ever seen her cry about the whole situation. Not angry tears, just this quiet, hurt disappointment. She said, "I saved that money thinking it would help build your home." That moment? That was when I stopped feeling any guilt about how things went down. Update 2, 4 months later. Okay, final update. Buckle up, because this is the one y'all have been waiting for. So remember the woman from the barbecue? 4 months of dating, and it was the healthiest, most honest relationship I'd ever been in. She met my grandparents on our 3rd date, my choice. She was nervous about it being too soon, but I told her these are my parents and I don't hide important people from each other. My grandmother pulled me aside after dinner and said, "That one has a good heart. Don't mess it up." My grandfather just nodded, which from him is basically a standing ovation. At 5 months, I proposed. Simple. At my grandparents' kitchen table after Sunday dinner. She cried. My grandmother cried. My grandfather did not cry, but his eyes were irritated from allergies, which is what he says every time he gets emotional. We planned the wedding in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. No venue coordinator. No Pinterest boards. No destination nonsense. We did it in my grandparents' backyard. The same backyard where I learned to throw a football, where my grandmother taught me to plant tomatoes, where my grandfather and I built a terrible birdhouse that still hangs crooked on the fence. 26 guests. My grandfather officiated. He got ordained online, and he took it more seriously than any ordained minister I've ever met. He wrote his own ceremony. He talked about what marriage actually means, not the Instagram version, but the holding someone's hand in the hospital at 3 a.m. version. There wasn't a dry eye. Even my buddy from work, who once told me emotions are just chemicals, was wiping his face with his sleeve. My grandmother made the cake. 3 tiers. Lemon with cream cheese frosting, which has been my favorite since I was 6. My wife still feels wild to type that. Wore a dress she found at a consignment shop for $200 that looked like it cost 10 times that. I wore my grandfather's suit from his own wedding in 1965. It needed exactly 0 alterations, which my grandmother says is proof that God planned this. Total cost of the wedding, about $3,400. And that includes the food, which we catered from a local barbecue place, because why pretend we're fancy when we're not? It was the best day of my life. Not because it was perfect in the way magazines define perfect, but because every single person there genuinely wanted to be there. Because my grandfather's voice cracked when he said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," and my grandmother grabbed my wife's hand and said, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart. We've been waiting for you." Now, the fallout. We didn't announce the wedding on social media. We didn't post photos. We told our close circle and left it at that. But my wife's cousin posted a single photo on her Instagram, just as cutting the cake, my grandparents in the background laughing, and tagged my wife. It took 11 days for that photo to reach my ex. I know because at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, "You got married? In 6 months? Are you kidding me right now?" I didn't respond, but the text kept coming. "You spent 3 years with me, and you couldn't commit. You meet some random girl and marry her in 5 months? Was this your plan the whole time? Were you cheating on me? You had your grandparents officiate? The same grandparents you said couldn't travel to Bora Bora? That last one. The lack of self-awareness was honestly breathtaking. She literally typed that out, read it back, and still hit send. The same grandparents you said couldn't travel. Ma'am, the issue was never that they couldn't travel. The issue was that you wanted to exclude them. They officiated my wedding from their own backyard. That was always the point. I show my wife the texts. She read them, looked at me, and said, she's still mad she lost the argument. Don't engage. So I didn't. Blocked the number. Then her mother texted me from her number. I hope you're proud of yourself. You've destroyed my daughter. She gave you the best years of her life, and you replaced her like she was nothing. The best years of her life. She's 29. Ma'am, your daughter has decades left. This isn't a telenovela. I blocked that number too, but it didn't stop. Over the next 2 weeks, I heard through various people that my ex was telling anyone who'd listened that I was a narcissist who'd been grooming my now wife while we were still together. That the whole breakup was orchestrated so I could be with someone else. That I'd used her for 3 years. The timeline didn't support any of this. I met my wife 5 weeks after the breakup at a barbecue with witnesses, but she wasn't interested in timelines. She was interested in being the victim. Here's the thing, though. By this point, she'd already lost most of her credibility. The real story had spread. People knew about Bora Bora. People knew about the 2 old people comment. People knew about the $8,000 girls trip and the trespassing incident at my grandparents' house. That police report made the rounds too, because the officer who responded happened to go to the same church as one of our mutual friends. Small world. Her social circle shrank considerably. Not because people were cruel about it, but because nobody wanted to be the next person she turned on. She'd shown a pattern. When things didn't go her way, she rewrote the story. People noticed. Last I heard, and this was a few weeks ago, she'd moved back in with her parents. Not because of financial hardship, but because, according to the same mutual friend network, she needed support. Her mother was apparently telling their extended family that I was an abusive ex, which is rich considering the only person who showed up uninvited to someone's home and had the police called on them was her. I don't feel good about how things ended for her. I want to be clear about that. I don't sit around celebrating someone else's downfall. But I also don't feel guilty. She made choices. She chose to disrespect the people who raised me. She chose to keep their money and spend it on a vacation. She chose to lie about what happened. She chose to have her mother harass my elderly grandparents. Every consequence she's facing grew directly from seeds she planted herself. As for me, I'm sitting in my grandparents' kitchen right now, typing this. My wife is in the living room, helping my grandmother organize her recipe binder. My grandfather is pretending to read the newspaper, but he's actually just watching them and smiling. The terrible birdhouse is still crooked on the fence outside. The lemon cake recipe is taped to the fridge. I almost married someone who wanted me to FaceTime my grandparents from Bora Bora. Instead, I married someone who's currently arguing with my grandmother about whether cardamom belongs in banana bread. It does, my wife is right, but I will never say this out loud because my grandmother's banana bread is a sacred institution in this house. That $8,000 my grandparents lost, my wife and I have been quietly putting money aside. By the end of next year, we're sending them on a cruise. My grandmother has always wanted to see Alaska. My grandfather says he doesn't care about glaciers, but I've seen him Google Alaska wildlife when he thinks nobody's looking. To everyone who followed this mess from the beginning, thank you. To everyone telling me I moved too fast with my wife, I hear you. But sometimes you spend years going slow with the wrong person, and then the right person shows up, and the pace just makes sense. And to my grandparents, who will never read this because my grandfather thinks Reddit is that website where people argue about video games, thank you for raising me. Thank you for teaching me that love isn't a destination wedding. It's showing up. Every Sunday, every crisis, every terrible birdhouse. I'm done posting about this. Time to go live it.